The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and disappointment. I sat in that uncomfortable chair, watching my wife Sarah fidget with her purse, while her brother Marcus leaned back like he owned the place, which, as it turned out, he pretty much did. "To my grandson Marcus," the lawyer read in his monotone voice, "I leave my house, my savings account, and my investment portfolio." Marcus tried to look humble, but I caught that smirk. Sarah squeezed my hand. We'd been counting on something, anything, to help with the medical bills from her cancer treatment last year. The insurance had covered most of it, but most still left us drowning. "To my grandson-in-law, Jake," the lawyer continued, and my heart jumped. Maybe there was hope after all. "I leave my 1987 Chevrolet pickup truck currently parked behind the barn." That was it. No savings account, no investments. Just a truck that hadn't run in 5 years and probably wasn't worth the gas to haul it to the scrap yard. Marcus actually chuckled. "Sorry, Jake. Guess Grandpa knew who the real family was." Sarah shot him a look that could have melted steel, but the damage was done. I felt smaller than I had in years, sitting there in my work clothes while Marcus wore his fancy suit. The lawyer handed me a set of keys that felt heavier than they should have. "The truck is yours whenever you want to collect it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Outside, the October wind was picking up, and I could smell rain coming. Seemed fitting somehow. "We'll figure something out," Sarah whispered as we walked to our car. But I was already wondering how much scrap metal was worth these days. The truck looked worse than I'd remembered. Sitting behind Grandpa's barn like some forgotten relic, rust eating through the wheel wells and a spider web crack across the windshield that looked like lightning frozen in glass. I'd driven out to the farm alone, telling Sarah I needed to assess what we were dealing with. Truth was, I couldn't stand the thought of her seeing how little her grandfather had thought of me. The paint had faded from blue to something closer to gray, and the bed was full of old hay, and what looked like a family of mice had made themselves at home in the cab. The driver's side door creaked like a haunted house when I pulled it open. Inside wasn't much better. The bench seat had a tear that ran from one end to the other, stuffing poking out like cotton clouds. The dashboard was cracked, and the radio looked like it belonged in a museum. I turned the key just to see what would happen. Nothing. Not even a click. "Well, Grandpa," I said to the empty air, "thanks for nothing." But even as I said it, something felt wrong. Grandpa had been a lot of things. Stubborn, old-fashioned, sometimes downright difficult. But he wasn't cruel. He'd always been fair, even when it wasn't easy. I sat there in the driver's seat, looking out through that cracked windshield at the fields where I'd helped him harvest corn every fall until I was 18, where he'd taught me to drive this very truck when I was 12, my feet barely reaching the pedals. Maybe there was more to this than met the eye. Maybe I was just desperate to believe that. The smell hit me first, that mixture of old leather, motor oil, and something else I couldn't quite place. It was the smell of Saturday mornings when I was 10 years old, riding shotgun while Grandpa checked fence lines and told stories about the old days. I ran my hand along the steering wheel, remembering how his weathered fingers had gripped it the same way. He'd been a man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. "A truck's not just transportation, Jake," he'd told me once. "It's freedom. It's possibility." Looking at this rust bucket now, I couldn't see much possibility. The floorboards had holes big enough to put your foot through, and the headliner was hanging down like a gray curtain. But I kept sitting there anyway, letting the memories wash over me. Grandpa teaching me to back up a trailer. The time we got stuck in the mud during spring planting and had to walk 3 miles home. The way he'd always kept a thermos of coffee and a bag of peppermints in the glove compartment. I reached over and popped it open, half expecting to find those same peppermints after all these years. Instead, there was just the truck's registration, an old pair of work gloves, and a small flashlight that probably hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. The registration was made out to William Henry Thompson, Grandpa's full name. Seeing it written there in his careful handwriting made something twist in my chest. He'd been gone 6 months now, and I still caught myself wanting to call him when something went wrong. Like now, when everything seemed to be falling apart at once. I decided to give the truck a proper inspection before calling it a total loss. Sarah deserved that much at least. If I was going to sell it for scrap, I needed to know exactly what we were dealing with. The hood took some muscle to get open, and when it finally gave way, I found exactly what I'd expected, an engine that looked like it had been through a war. Rust everywhere, belts cracked and hanging loose, and what might have once been spark plug wires now looked more like modern art. Still, I kept looking. Under the seats, in the door panels, even in the spare tire well. I wasn't sure what I was searching for, but something told me to keep going. The glove compartment yielded nothing new. The center console, what passed for one in a truck this old, was empty except for a few old receipts and a broken pen. I was about to give up when I remembered something. Grandpa had always been paranoid about keeping important papers safe, not in the house where they might get lost or stolen, but somewhere he could get to them quickly if needed. I started feeling around the edges of the seat, running my fingers along the seams and under the cushions. The driver's side gave me nothing. But when I moved to the passenger side, my hand hit something that didn't belong. There was a gap between the seat back and the bottom cushion, just wide enough to slide something thin inside. I worked my fingers deeper, feeling around until I touched what felt like paper. My heart started beating faster as I tried to work whatever it was loose without tearing it. Finally, I managed to pull out a manila envelope, yellowed with age and bent from years of hiding. My hands were shaking as I turned the envelope over. Written across the front in Grandpa's careful script were the words, "For Jake, when you need it most." The flap wasn't sealed, just tucked in, like he'd wanted to make it easy to open when the time came. Inside, I found 3 items that would change everything I thought I knew about my inheritance. The first was a letter, written on the same yellow legal pad paper Grandpa had always used for his important correspondence. The second was a folded document that looked official, with stamps and seals I didn't recognize. The third was a small brass key attached to a piece of string. I started with the letter, my eyes adjusting to Grandpa's handwriting in the dim light of the truck cab. "Jake," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found what I left for you. I know it probably looks like I didn't think much of you, giving you this old truck while Marcus got everything else. But sometimes the most valuable things don't look like much on the surface." I had to stop reading for a moment, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa knew exactly what I'd be thinking. "This truck has been in our family for 37 years, the letter continued. "I bought it the day your grandmother told me she was pregnant with your mother-in-law. It's seen births, deaths, good times, and bad. But more than that, it's been my safe deposit box." Safe deposit box? I looked around the deteriorating interior with new eyes. "The key in this envelope opens a storage unit in town, Unit 247 at Miller's Self-Storage on Highway 9. What you'll find there is my real gift to you." I read the letter 3 more times before the words really sank in. Grandpa had been planning this for years, maybe decades. Every detail was thought out, every contingency covered. "I know Marcus thinks he's the golden boy," the letter went on, "and maybe he is. But he's never known struggle the way you have. He's never had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. He's never held his wife's hand in a hospital room, wondering how you're going to pay for the treatment that might save her life. How had he known about Sarah's cancer? We'd barely told anyone, trying to keep it private, trying to handle it ourselves. I've been watching Jake. I see how you take care of my granddaughter. I see how you work 2 jobs and never complain. I see how you put her needs before your own every single time. That's the kind of man I want to help. That's the kind of man who deserves a real chance." The second document was a deed. At first, I couldn't make sense of all the legal language, but as I read through it more carefully, certain words jumped out at me. Mineral rights, oil and gas leases, Thompson Family Trust. My grandfather had been sitting on mineral rights to 300 acres of farmland. Land that, according to the dates on the document, had been leased to an energy company just 2 months before his death. The third page showed payment schedules. Monthly royalty checks that would be coming to whoever held the deed. Checks that added up to more money than I'd made in the past 5 years combined. The truck was never the real inheritance, I whispered to myself, finally understanding. It was the hiding place for something infinitely more valuable. Miller's self-storage looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s, which probably meant it was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have trusted with his secrets. The office was a small trailer with faded siding and a hand-painted sign that had seen better decades. The manager, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands, looked up when I walked in with the key. "You must be Jake," she said before I could introduce myself. "Bill told me you'd be coming by eventually." "He talked about me?" "Oh, honey, he talked about you all the time. Worried about you something fierce, especially after your wife got sick." She stood up and grabbed a clipboard from behind the counter. "He prepaid the rental on that unit for the next 10 years. Said his grandson was going to need time to figure things out." 10 years. He'd been planning this for at least that long. Unit 247 was in the back corner of the facility, away from the main road and hidden behind a row of larger units. The key turned easily in the lock, like it had been oiled recently. Inside, I found a small room lined with metal shelving. But this wasn't just storage. It was an office, a desk, a filing cabinet, a small safe, and boxes of documents organized with military precision. On the desk was another letter, this one shorter than the first. "Welcome to the real family business," it read. "Everything you need to know is in the filing cabinet. The combination to the safe is your wedding anniversary. Month, day, year. What's inside will get you started. The rest is up to you." I sat down in the chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what Grandpa had left me. The filing cabinet was a masterclass in organization. Every folder was labeled, every document dated and cross-referenced. Grandpa had been running what amounted to a small investment company out of this storage unit. The mineral rights were just the beginning. Over the years, he'd quietly acquired interests in several properties across 3 counties. Oil wells, natural gas deposits, even a small wind farm that was generating monthly checks. But more than that, he'd been researching and documenting everything: market trends, geological surveys, environmental impact studies. He'd turned himself into an expert on energy development in our region. One folder was labeled "For Jake's Education." Inside, I found simplified explanations of everything from royalty calculations to tax implications. It was like a college course in natural resource management, written in Grandpa's plain-spoken style. "The key to this business," one note read, "is patience and information. The energy companies have teams of lawyers and geologists. We have something better. We have time and we have local knowledge. We know which farmers are struggling and might be willing to sell. We know which properties have the best access to transportation. We know the people." The safe combination worked on the first try. Inside, I found cash, more cash than I'd ever seen in one place. Enough to pay off Sarah's medical bills and still have money left over for a down payment on a house. But there was also something else. A small notebook with names and phone numbers. "Contacts," the cover read. "People you can trust." The first name on the list was a lawyer in the county seat. The second was a geologist. The third was a banker who specialized in agricultural investments. Grandpa had built me a network. I spent the next 3 hours going through every document, every file, every carefully preserved piece of paper. Slowly, the full scope of Grandpa's plan began to emerge. He'd been building this for me specifically. Not for Marcus, not for Sarah, but for me. Every investment, every acquisition, every strategic decision had been made with my future in mind. The mineral rights alone were worth more than Marcus's entire inheritance. But Grandpa had been smart about it, structuring everything through a trust that wouldn't be subject to estate taxes. Marcus would get the house and the savings account, but I would get the business that generated real wealth. More importantly, I would get the knowledge to build on what he'd started. One folder contained correspondence with other landowners in the area. Grandpa had been quietly negotiating options to purchase mineral rights on adjacent properties. If I wanted to, I could expand the operation significantly. Another folder showed his research into renewable energy projects, wind farms, solar installations, even some experimental geothermal work. He'd been positioning the family to benefit from whatever direction the energy market moved. "The future belongs to people who can adapt," one of his notes read. "Oil and gas won't last forever, but energy will always be needed. Stay ahead of the curve." But the most important folder was labeled simply, "Why Jake?" Inside was a collection of observations he'd made over the years, times when I'd helped neighbors without being asked, decisions I'd made that put family before profit, character assessments that made me sound like a better man than I felt like. "Marcus is smart," one entry read, "but he's never been tested. Jake has been tested every day for the past 10 years, and he's never failed the test." The first call I made was to the lawyer whose name was at the top of Grandpa's contact list. Robert Chen had been handling the trust paperwork for years, waiting for the day when I would finally discover what had been left to me. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," Chen told me over the phone. "He spent 15 years building this for you. Every decision was made with your best interests in mind. The legal work was already done. The trust was established. The mineral rights were secure, and the monthly royalty checks would start coming to me immediately. All I had to do was sign a few papers and provide banking information." "There's one more thing," Chen said. "Your grandfather left instructions for me to give you some advice when you found everything. He said to tell you that wealth is a tool, not a goal. Use it to build something bigger than yourself." The second call was to Sarah. I could hear the confusion in her voice when I told her to meet me at the farm. "Jake, what's going on? You've been gone for hours." "I found something," I said. "Something that changes everything." When she arrived, I was sitting in the truck with all the documents spread out on the dashboard. I handed her Grandpa's first letter and watched her face change as she read. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew how hard things have been." "He knew everything," I said, "and he had a plan." I showed her the deed, the royalty schedules, the cash from the safe. I watched her do the math in her head, saw the moment when she realized what this meant for our future. "We can pay off the medical bills," she said. "We can pay off everything," I replied. The confrontation with Marcus came sooner than I'd expected. He showed up at the farm the next morning while I was loading tools from the storage unit into the truck. "Heard you've been making some phone calls," he said, climbing out of his BMW with that same smirk he'd worn at the lawyer's office. "News travels fast. Small town. People talk." He looked at the truck with obvious disdain. "So what's this I hear about mineral rights? Some kind of scam you're trying to pull?" I handed him a copy of the deed, watched his face change as he read through it, saw the exact moment when he realized what it meant. "This can't be legal," he said finally. "Grandpa wouldn't have hidden something like this from the family." "He didn't hide it from family," I said. "He hid it from you." That hit home. Marcus had always assumed he was Grandpa's favorite, the chosen heir who would carry on the family legacy. Finding out that the real inheritance had gone to someone else, someone he'd always looked down on, was clearly eating at him. "I'll contest this," he threatened. "I'll take you to court." "With what grounds?" I asked. "Everything was done legally. Your grandfather was of sound mind when he set up the trust. The lawyer has documentation going back 15 years. Marcus stood there for a long moment, probably running through his options and not liking any of them. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "He left you exactly what you deserved. A house you can sell for quick cash and a savings account that'll last you maybe 2 years if you're careful. But this?" I gestured toward the documents. "This takes work. This takes commitment. This takes caring about something bigger than yourself." 6 months later, I was sitting in the same truck, but everything else had changed. The engine had been rebuilt, the interior restored, and the rust treated and painted over. It looked like the truck Grandpa had been proud to drive, back when it was new. More importantly, I'd learned to see it the way he had, not as transportation, but as a symbol of possibility. The mineral rights were generating steady income, enough to pay off our debts and start building real wealth. But following Grandpa's advice, I'd been reinvesting most of it, acquiring options on adjacent properties and researching new opportunities. Sarah had gone back to school to get her real estate license. With her knowledge of the local area and my understanding of mineral rights, we made a good team. We were helping other families navigate the complex world of energy leases, making sure they got fair deals and understood what they were signing. "It's not about the money," Sarah said one evening, as we drove home from a meeting with a farmer who was considering leasing his land for a wind farm. "It's about helping people make informed decisions." That was something Grandpa would have understood. He'd always believed that real success came from lifting up your community, not just yourself. The storage unit had become our office. I'd added a computer and a phone line, turning it into the headquarters for what we were calling Thompson Resource Management. It felt right, carrying on Grandpa's work in the same place where he'd planned it all. Marcus had never followed through on his threat to contest the inheritance. The lawyer had made it clear that he didn't have a case, and eventually, he'd moved on to other grievances. Today marks exactly 1 year since I found that envelope behind the truck seat. I'm sitting in the same spot where it all began, but now I understand what Grandpa was really trying to teach me. The truck was never about the truck. It was about persistence, about looking deeper when things don't make sense, about understanding that the most valuable gifts often come disguised as burdens. Over the past year, we've helped dozens of families in our county navigate energy leases and mineral rights deals. We've prevented several people from being taken advantage of by companies that count on local ignorance. We've built something that serves our community while building our own security. Sarah's cancer has been in remission for 8 months now. The stress of financial uncertainty is gone, replaced by the satisfaction of meaningful work. We're building the house we always dreamed of, on land that will stay in our family for generations. But the most important thing I've learned is that Grandpa's real gift wasn't money or property or even opportunity. It was perspective. He taught me that how you handle adversity defines who you are. He showed me that sometimes the best inheritance is the knowledge that someone believed in you enough to plan for your success. The truck still sits behind the barn sometimes when I'm not using it for work. But now it's not a reminder of disappointment. It's a reminder of possibility, of the unexpected ways love shows up in our lives. Marcus drives by occasionally, usually in whatever new car he's bought with his inheritance money. He doesn't wave, and that's fine. Some people never learn to see past the surface, but I've learned to look deeper. To trust that when life hands you something that looks like junk, it might just be hiding the key to everything you've ever wanted.